The people who knew you before the success, they remember who you were when no one was watching. And that memory, that might be the most valuable thing you have as you climb. Welcome to Daily Power Boost, Ignite Your Potential, the podcast where your transformation begins. I'm Sean Michael, and each day I'll bring you quick, impactful insights and action steps to fuel your personal and professional growth. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or someone ready to break limits and ignite greatness, this is your daily power boost to crush obstacles, stay focused, and awaken the extraordinary potential within you. Because remember, greatness begins within. Let's go. Welcome back to Daily Power Boost. Yesterday, we talked about the mentor gap, finding people ahead of you when you're at the top. Today, I want to address those people behind you. Not behind in success, behind in their timeline. Those people who knew you before the accolades, before the title, before the platform, before anyone else cared who you were. And here's why they matter now more than ever. They knew you when you had nothing to prove, and they remind you of who you are when the noise gets loud. I know someone who built something impressive over the years, kind of success that opens doors, gets attention, changes how people see you. One day, they were at an event surrounded by people wanting something from them. Advice, access, partnership. Everyone was performing, everyone was positioning. And they felt exhausted. Then they got a text from an old friend, someone who knew them from years ago before any of it. Just checking in, no agenda, no ask. And they realized this person didn't care about what they'd built. They cared about them. And in that moment, they saw how rare that had become. Here's what happens as you rise. New people enter your life, and most of them know you by your success, your title, your work, your platform, but they don't know you. And here's the thought that traps many leaders. If I slow down, if I stop achieving, will these people still care about me? And when you're caught in that thought, you start performing, you start proving, you start believing that your worth is tied to what you produce. But those people who knew you before, they break the illusion because they cared about you when you had nothing. And that reminds you you're valuable because of who you are, not because of what you've accomplished. Here's the shift. Don't lose people who knew you before. Not because they're useful, but because they're grounding. They're the ones that'll call you out when you're becoming someone you're not. They're the ones who remind you of who you were before the pressure. They're the ones who don't need you to perform because they already know you're enough. Let's reframe who these people actually are. They're not your old life that you've outgrown. They're your anchor. They knew you when you were figuring it out, when you were uncertain, when you were still learning. And that version of you, it's still in there. Here's your insight for today. When you're caught up in anxious thinking about maintaining your success, proving your worth, or protecting your reputation, you start to lose touch with who you actually are. But the people who knew you before the noise, they help you drop back into a clearer state, not because they do anything special, but because around them, you don't have to perform. And when you stop performing, your natural wisdom, your clarity, your peace, it's all there. And that peace, that's what we're diving into tomorrow. The vulnerability paradox. Why leaders who share struggle lead better. The people who knew you before remind you it's safe to be human. Tomorrow, We're talking about why showing that humanity makes you a stronger leader, not a weaker one. But first, let me go ahead and wrap up today with your people who knew you before practice. Think of 2 to 3 people who knew you before the success, before the title, before the platform, before the visibility. And ask yourself, when's the last time I actually connected with them, not transactionally, genuinely? If it's been a while, reach out, not to update them on your wins, just to be with them. What happens when you reconnect with people who knew you before? You remember who you are underneath all the noise. That's not a step backward. That's grounding. The people who knew you before success, they're not holding you back. They're holding you steady. Because the higher you climb, the louder the noise gets. And noise will convince you that you have to keep proving, keep performing, keep producing. But those people who knew you before, they remind you, you were enough then, you're enough now. And when you see that, when you drop out of the anxious thinking that says your worth depends on your next win, you lead from a completely different place, a grounded place, a human place. And that is where the best leadership comes from. This was the people who knew you before, why you need them now more than ever. Tomorrow, the vulnerability paradox, why leaders who share struggle lead better. Staying human isn't a weakness. It's honestly your greatest strength. With strength and heart, I'm Sean Michael. Stay close. Thanks for tuning in to Daily Power Boost. Ignite your potential. Remember, transformation starts with action. So take today's insight, make it your own, and awaken your inner potential. Because remember, greatness begins within. Catch you tomorrow for your next Power Boost.